Hello everybody, this is Tyler here once again from the Character Workshop, and after 2 episodes of not being in the setting, well, technically in the 2 episodes before I was here, but I was filming it on my webcam. But yeah, we are back to filming the Cave from England in this ordinary fashion that I've been doing, since I've been at this new house. And with the addition of this long tripod that I have. But anyways, we are back doing another Doctor Who review. This time we're going to be reviewing the 8th story of Season 2, which is overall the 16th story of Doctor Who. This one being simply titled The Chase. And if you guys didn't see my Space Museum review from 2 months back, the ending of that story kind of revealed that the Daleks were basically back once again for a 3rd time, and this time they have their own time machine to go after the Doctor and his companions. So, yeah, this story takes place in a variety of different settings, which, speaking of the story itself, let's talk about the plot. So at the beginning of the story, the Doctor and his companions basically take a look at the time-space visualizer that the Doctor got at the end of the Space Museum to take a look at events in history, kind of like a time and space television, basically. Ian first suggested that they watch the Gettysburg Address by Abraham Lincoln. Barbara then showed Queen Elizabeth I and William Shakespeare. And then Vicky had the Doctor and his companions watch the Beatles perform their One Ticket to Ride song. I think it's just called Ticket to Ride, but my bad. Anyways, so they land on basically a deserted planet, basically. And the planet, by the way, is called Eridius, I think. I might have mispronounced it. And the planet's base is very deserted, and Ian and Vicky go on and venture while the Doctor and Barbara kind of remain in the TARDIS for a bit. And they actually take a look at the time-space visualizer, and they see the Daleks embarking on a plan to follow the TARDIS to exterminate the Doctor and his companions, as well as destroying the TARDIS itself. And it basically realizes that these events happened in the past, and that the Daleks are probably already on the planets. The Doctor and Barbara go out to try and warn Ian and Vicky, who, in the process, while they were exploring, get trapped underneath the ground. And then, while the Doctor and Barbara were looking around, they then see the Daleks emerging out of the sands after a dust storm that happened on the planet. However, the Doctor and Barbara were saved by the native Eridians, the inhabitants of the planet. And eventually they're reunited with Vicky and Ian, who were basically injured while encountering the beasts down below, which were simply called the Mire Beasts. And while the Eridians were planning on, giving the Doctor and his companions away to the Daleks so that they won't be exterminated, the beasts then attack again and basically kind of save the Doctor and his companions from being, given to the Daleks by, the planet's native people. And the Doctor and his friends then flee into the TARDIS and, they basically travel somewhere else just to avoid being around the Daleks, basically. The next stop the TARDIS made was in New York City in 1966 on top of the Empire State Building, which they leave after a short period of time, and then the Daleks then show up, and then they also leave. And then the next stop they make is on the Mary Celeste, which they eventually leave on as well, especially after, the crew of the ship mistaken Barbara as a stowaway. And after the TARDIS crew leaves, the Daleks come by, frighten the whole entire crew to the point where they all started to abandon ship. And basically the Daleks, then follow along the TARDIS crew as usual. And then they land in a mysterious old house, which the Doctor and his companions then encounter, various, Halloween-esque horror creatures like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, who, also, as soon as the Daleks arrived, the monsters tried to, attack the Daleks, but with, no success. And, while this is all going on, the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara get into the TARDIS, however, Vicky being left behind. And, not a single one of them figured out that that mysterious horror house that they were in was actually some kind of like theme park attraction. And Vicky then stows away into the Daleks' time machine, and she actually witnesses them creating an android replica of the Doctor himself. And basically the Daleks programmed this Doctor duplicate to kill, the Doctor and his companions, which they arrived on a planet called Mechanus. And Vicky eventually reunites with the Doctor, Ian and Barbara, but then, a fight ensues once, they see the Doctor and then the fake Doctor. And Ian, at first fights the real Doctor thinking he was the fake one. And then, basically, finds out that, obviously the android Doctor was right behind him the whole time. And, they attack that instead. And eventually the duplicate then, gets destroyed basically. And funny enough, one of the reasons why they kind of found out quickly that that was a duplicate Doctor was the fact that like the robot Doctor mistakenly called Vicky Susan, and that's what made Barbara realize that that was the real Doctor. Well, the Doctor that said that Vicky was Susan was the fake Doctor. Sorry, my bad. As they were about to be taken out by the Daleks, the Mechanoids appear and basically take the Doctor's companions to their city and basically imprison them, along with a shipwrecked human astronaut named Steven Taylor, played by Peter Purves. And under the cover of the Daleks attacking on the city, the Doctor and his companions then, escape. And then, basically, the Daleks and the Mechanoids kind of had, like, an all-out battle against one another, which, of course, in the process, led to the city being destroyed. And, the Dalek time machine itself, while still on the planets, remains untouched. And basically, Ian and Barbara then decide to, like, use the Dalek time machine in order to go back to London, where they belong. And eventually, after some talking with the Doctor, they try to persuade him to help them operate it. And the Doctor warns them about the risks of, like, operating on it, incorrectly. And Ian and Barbara took the chance, and they took the Dalek time machine back to London. And they arrived in London, in 1965, 2 years after they originally left, in An Unearthly Child. And then they set the Dalek time machine to auto-destruct. And then basically, through the time-space visualizer, the Doctor and Vicky were able to see Ian and Barbara basically live out, a happy life back on Earth. And they witnessed the conversation between them. And, the Doctor, claims that, he'll miss Ian and Barbara as he and Vicky continue their adventures in the TARDIS without them. So yeah, that was basically the plots of The Chase. And I gotta say, while it's obviously not as good as Dalek Invasion of Earth, I do think overall it's, a more interesting story than the first Dalek story from Season 1. For a few reasons. I think one of the main reasons, of course, is this story felt very similar to the Keys of Marinus, in my opinion, with, the Doctor and his crew traveling to different places. And I thought it was kind of interesting that, like, Terry Nation, the creator of the Daleks, who also wrote The Keys of Marinus, decided to, bring that concept back into The Chase. And, also with this story being the introduction of Steven Taylor, this, would of course eventually lead him into becoming, like, a regular companion, from this story onwards. Obviously it's not, in the chase itself at the very end, the crew, like, the Doctor and his companions thought that, like, Steven, was, trapped on the Mechanoid city and got, killed while the city was being destroyed, but, it was revealed that he survived, and, yeah, we'll see how he ended up appearing in the next story once I eventually review the Time Meddler. So yeah, introduction of, like, one of the newest companions of the Doctor at the time. Also, one of the biggest takeaways from The Chase is that it was the departure of Ian and Barbara, who have, been on the show since, an unearthly child, and, 16 stories later, this is now their departure. And, apparently, this was a decision made independently by, the actors themselves, William Russell and Jacqueline Hill, who played Ian and Barbara respectively. And, actually, their departure actually kind of, upsetted William Hartnell during the production because, obviously he knew them very well, he was close with them, I guess, and, it actually kind of makes, the story, feel, a bit more personal, I guess, in some ways, because it wasn't just the Doctor being sad about Ian and Barbara being gone, it's just William Hartnell himself being sad that, William Russell and Jacqueline Hill are no longer with him on the show, and, yeah, that was kind of interesting, and yeah, they had, a much, definitely, a great departure, I would say, for Ian and Barbara, I mean, they did brought this up at the end of the story, with the Dalek time machine being there, they now have an excuse to, finally go back to, what they were before, and yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. And also, speaking of the characters themselves, they're all great, the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, Vicky, I mean, I know we only saw Steven at the end of, that story, but, we'll see what goes on from that character this point forward. And this was, the first and only on-screen appearance, to my knowledge, of the Mechanoids, and it's kind of a shame they didn't appear again since then. But yeah, I kind of liked the way they looked. They kind of looked like futuristic Easter eggs for some reason. I just love it. Also, the various, areas that they've gone to is also very interesting. I know some people kind of criticized, the portion where they were, in that, haunted attraction thing. I mean, it was revealed at the end of the story that this was a part of an attraction and not, an actual, fantasy haunted house with, Dracula and Frankenstein's monster in it. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the chase gave me, huge Keys of Marinus vibes. But yes, not much else to say. Chase was pretty good. Anyways, one other thing I forgot to mention, I think this might have been one of the first times in Doctor Who history, to my knowledge, that they've referenced America, the US in particular. Especially with Ian wanting to see the Gettysburg Address on the time-space visualizer, and obviously their trip to New York City. But yeah, kind of the first time I think Doctor Who ever referenced the United States in any of their stories, so that's pretty interesting. Don't really have much else to say, I guess. Other than the fact that, that brief moments at the beginning where they were looking at the Beatles perform on the time-space visualizer, unfortunately that scene is not available to watch on the physical media releases of The Chase in, North America and Australia, for rights reasons, I guess, which is really ironic because the Beatles are owned by... the Beatles are a British band, and it's kind of weird that, that scene could not be shown in the US and Australian versions of The Chase. On DVD and Blu-ray, at least. And actually, that's kind of the reason why I got the limited edition Season 2 collection set for Doctor Who, the UK one, because that Blu-ray actually has the Chase scene uncut, so... at least the Beatles scene from The Chase uncut, so that's why I got it. And I think that's officially about it for The Chase. I had a lot to talk about with this story, and I think I've said enough. Anyways, my score for this story, I was kind of debatable about it because, I'm like, where does this rank compared to, the Daleks from Season 1? And I'm like, well, I mean, The Chase is a little bit more interesting because, they were in different settings, throughout the whole story, and, the departure of Ian and Barbara. So, I think I would put The Chase above the Daleks, and for that reason alone, I'm gonna give The Chase a rating of 8 out of 10. And that's about it for this episode of AK from England. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more episodes of AK from England, or just mediocre plush content in general. And be sure to turn on the notification bell so you get notified each time I upload a new episode of AK from England, or any of my other stuff. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you think. That is about it. This is Tyler from the Character Workshop, signing out. And depending on when the next episode comes out, whether it's later this month or in December, I may be talking about the final story of Season 2 of Doctor Who, which is The Time Meddler. And Not only is it, the first story to have, the Dr. Vicky and Steven as a crew, but also we get introduced to a villain that actually is very similar to the Doctor in some way. How? We'll find out.